Good morning, good afternoon, HubSpot Nation. Welcome to another edition of Let's Build Your Audience in HubSpot with Mr. Oaks. How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I am doing well, doing well. Excited to be with you ahead of our upcoming event.
Yeah,
So just right at the gate, next time we would have been doing this show. We actually had the Profoundly kickoff coming up. So don't worry if you don't see us on the schedule. We'll be still bringing the value.
there will be a lot of things on the schedule that day for everybody in HubSpot Nation.
Yes, it's going to be a fun day. But today, going to turn the tables. I've got some kind of interesting thing happened with Amazon this week, and we're going to talk about like data-driven, uh, uh, customer success, data-driven delivery, right? And that, like, we've done all this work to understand our audience. We've captured this data, and so often, I see it like close to 98% of the time, at least in my world of industrial manufacturing, uh, when data systems are involved. Like you look at these maps, and this is no shade at the map that we're about to look at, because there's a time and a place to focus on marketing and sales only. But what we're going to talk about today is after closed one, right? And so many maps. And this is in these conversations where we also talk about having retention goals and upsell goals and cross sell goals and things that we want and know should happen after the sale. Yet our maps and strategies and data plans end at closed one, right?
Yeah, yeah, and th- uh, boy, you're pushing on a button that I think it's let's share the map. There is plenty of shade to bring to this map, and one of the reasons that it excludes post sale is um, it is a B2B sale, particularly, right, is or has maybe been made a lot more kind of formulaic and abstract and approachable than what delivery looks like, even within a single industry. Like in industrial manufacturing, even, or you're the expert there, not me, but I do know there's a difference between like parts and assembly and where those fit in what post sale delivery looks like and how that fits into like the supply chain that produces an end product. In one of the industries that I focus on, which is franchising, sales and development of new franchises, is the post sale is even more important than pre-sale, right? Like the time between somebody saying like, yeah, I want to open a new business and that business operating is really important to get right, you know? And so, we talk in this about your sales and marketing process, building up this understanding of the customer to be actionable, both for, as illustrated here, like you learn what is successful and what fails, and you take that back into the top of your journey for those folks. Um, you can do that same thing post sale too, right? And it's not
Yeah.
pictured on this chart, but it's you know uh, I think about it a lot, and I'm eating my own dog food here in the sense that all the time I say like, look, you're treating your customer journey like it ends at closed one, and it doesn't. Like there's in some cases, like in franchising, there's often 6 months, 12 months, 18 months before they realize the early stages of that goal that they made the purchase to support.
Yeah. And aside from the fact this is always on my mind, it happens to be on my mind this week, because something interesting happened with the, for me, it's the easy poster child of this very topic, and that's Amazon and their ability to just always put, uh, the customer first, and like to the point of why does it make sense that they just let you send stuff back without even asking if it was wrong, and they will automatically resend you stuff, and it's no surprise that they are able to do this based on the data that they have. And in those cases, they have, and I don't think this is a stretch assumption, they probably have data telling them it is not worth our time to try and go back and forth with a customer about what may be broken, what's wrong. We're just sending stuff. We trust them in most cases to send it back, and that is more profitable for us to do it that way. And what happened this week is I was placing an order. So I have one regularly scheduled, like every other week order. So I'm taking advantage of a subscribe and save. And it was due to come on Wednesday. And there's actually a positive and negative to what happened here, because I had to make a decision. I was out of that thing. Uh, I ran out before Wednesday, right? So I actually went out and bought some more of it, thinking that I wasn't going to get it till Wednesday. And this was confirmed for me when uh, we have an instant pot that we need new gaskets for. It's getting a little, harder to seal it in, and this stuff. So I went online real quick, and as I'm doing it, very like $10 purchase, right? It's saying I can get it, same day. And as I check out, it gives me the offer to not get it same day, because I'm already getting another shipment on Wednesday,
Mm-hmm.
right? So for me, that confirms for me that I'm getting this other thing on Wednesday, right? Um, I make the order, and then I get an order confirmation that now I'm getting both things the next day, right? So they actually moved the other order up, which at the end of the day, I'm okay having more of the thing. I wouldn't have needed to go buy more of it if I had known that would happen. Now, as a customer, I know that could be happening, so I will do the thing first to see if it can change my order. But that kind of agility to have visibility and of me as a customer and what I'm buying and when and my buying habits
Right.
all goes into the decisions they can make and the decisions they can build into their system. Like obviously nobody's there saying, "Oh, Chris ordered this, so let's go ahead and get him." But even that though, even giving your internal teams the ability to have that visibility is a huge step in the right direction. And what most people are surprised to see is that, much like a lot of the other conversations we have, like specific data points gathered at any point in the customer journey can go a huge way towards providing these kinds of experiences. Like it's not just because Amazon is the richest company in the world and they have the richest data set and all these systems and all these places, they exist everywhere.
Right.
This doesn't mean the small business owner can't do similar things, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that it strikes me as that's a post-purchase thing. It's also a pre-purchase thing. I mean, a lot of businesses in whether it's HubSpot or another CRM or another process tool go through this maturity phase where when I'm dealing with clients a lot, I talk about that there are these different stages, and the first time you try something like it's a or experiment, you're doing like a proof of concept or a project. When you realize it's viable, you move it to a pilot. If you don't turn it into a process, then it just becomes a practice, the way you do things, but you don't have it documented. You can't really transfer that knowledge to a new employee. Eventually, it becomes a process. That's when it's documented, supported by systems, automated, etc. And eventually that becomes scar tissue, and you need to tear it out and rethink your process over time. But if you don't get down to that process level, you can do automations and things like, oh, when we move a deal to this stage, or when an order reaches this stage post purchase, then we send this email or create this task or get this data from an external system. And that's great, but it's earlier in that sophistication journey than you think, because what you just described there is the system was able to determine, like, well, it's better to make one trip on Monday than a trip on Monday and a trip on Wednesday, right? And in a, whether it's in a fulfillment or in a sales process, if all you're doing is throwing to do items on the deal in HubSpot, or generating tickets in your onboarding pipeline, or tasks on a deal in a pipeline that you use for onboarding, then that's just all disconnected. And somebody who gets a decision like that bubbled up doesn't have all of the information to be able to make a judgment call that delights a customer. You know, like the processes that a thing that I think of a lot is like swag or post-purchase gifts or delight experiences like that. Like, you know, you've signed on and we're going to ship you a hat or a shirt or whatever. That is often a completely external process that everybody knows happens. But you just know, like, oh, they get a package when I move the deal that closed one. Somebody does it or something, whatever. And there isn't an awareness of like alignment. You have to intervene and say, like, oh, their kid plays hockey or whatever, and and tweak that experience a little bit to say, like, oh, we usually send, or even just like, how many kids do they have? Let's send them stuff for all of their kids or whatever. Um, you it becomes the that not having that thought through makes it harder to deliver that experience, even though you have everything even integrated, right? And so, like, you need to like press through that. Oh, it's fine. We, you know, such and such gets notified and they hit OK, and then the order goes through, and the swag fulfillment company just ships stuff out, right? To think about what that, you know, in that example, post-purchase experience looks like.
Yeah. And in most cases, and what we're going to talk about, like Amazon's business model is to be as hands off as possible, right? That's not, people always go right there when you say like why it's beneficial to have an Amazon like experience. It's like, no, we need to, like, that doesn't mean everybody needs to buy now and ship everything without touching anything, right? Because in most businesses, especially the ones we work with, it's highly consultative process. Like, but even the easier that you make it to move forward, right? It gives you continuous opportunities to say, like, I know you picked this thing out. You built this thing, and we can give you a quote for that, but you really, it sounds like you need this other part, right? And even when they buy those other parts, like, this was always interesting to me internally, like, as salespeople don't want to be on the hook for quoting like $100, $200 parts when they're trying to sell hundreds of thousands of dollars like equipment. But then they don't want to make it accessible, because what if they buy the wrong part? And it's like, instead, that's just a lead, and they're okay with being told it's the wrong part, right? And it's another chance to say, look, you don't need that part. You actually need this part. Or if you actually want that part, you actually have to upgrade. And now we're talking about upsells, cross sells, right? And all this data goes into like supporting the team to have those conversations. Because another thing, and I'm going to share my screen,
Yeah.
uh, the reason to get granular and like the value of getting granular about this is really like the bridge for me with a lot of people is just knowing that you can do this stuff in HubSpot, right? There's a HubSpot after closed one. You can build it basically however you want right now. And if you create the space for it, it allows for a lot of what we're talking about much easier than most people expect. This is also why I go so hard on how we classify these life cycle stages, right? Like if you understand exactly what they're trying to accomplish at each stage, if they're learning about uh, let's say, warranty plans or, service contracts and how they work, they might come over here to buying, and it's for the equipment. It's for the hard good, the hard product. Um, but if you were able to capture that activity of what they were learning about, what they were researching,
Mm-hmm.
even if they can't buy it like during the sale, you have that data to say like, okay, at some point they're going to want an extra warranty or another service contract or some kind of thing because they were interested over here, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's why I like to say like, okay, if we understand that they're, learning, they're researching, and even on this side, like they have to create value for the organization itself has to realize the value, right? And then maybe they like this journey so much that if we understand and are delivering that, we can make it easier for them to advocate, for us internally and know exactly how to say it and when to say it. So there's so many points of value. Um, and I'll just hit on this real quick because I know it's hard to read or it's impossible to read until I, you know, zoom in. Right. This is what I've always gotten at about a deliverable record, like creating these objects in HubSpot that are designed for post-sale management to help teams create a space for this ongoing relationship information.
Mm-hmm.
We've heard about it's. I use the object library now. If custom objects aren't available, like listings and services, work really well for this. Um, but it's just creating a space for the non-sales, non-marketers to come in and manage the relationship in a granular way. Now, originally, I started creating this because we were being asked for both internally and externally an Amazon-like experience where I don't care about the status of the order. I care about the status of everything inside the order. And when I'm trying to get your support for a 2-year project that's going to have 4 different shipments at different times and needs to go to specific addresses, I noticed that ERPs and HubSpot were not built to support that. Like, so you just end up with a ton of notes in places they
Right.
don't belong,
Yeah.
which you can't report on. But when I gave the team this space, not only does it make a space to manage it effectively, it also creates the ability to communicate it to the customer, much more effectively. And when you're good at it with HubSpot CMS, you get the customer's help to maintain the data. Like here's an address form, if any changes, because they need it to show up to the same place just
Right.
as much as probably more so than you do. Right. So much of this is just creating the access. And like when you start to relate this to upsell, cross sell, resell goals that almost every team I've ever talked to like has, even though I've only shown deliverables over here. I mean, this stuff links to deals, it links to invoices, it links to
Mm-hmm.
payments, links to subscriptions, right? And this is why I'm so excited about cash flow and what it's going to be bringing to HubSpot, because I'm hearing that there is an understanding that deals are not the place to manage like post-sale renewal revenue, right? There is no sales process. The only reason we created deals is because that's how we have to report on revenue, like in HubSpot,
Right.
right? And now that we have orders and invoices and subscriptions and payments and maybe some other objects on the way, deals are not enough, right? So what I hope to help with this year is understand like we can paint this whole picture now that is truly data-driven delivery to get to like the revenue objectives that almost every company has. And before I get more granular, I'd love to like hear your side of this.
Yeah, I mean, uh, I've built similar objects. Like I created a to meet similar needs, and as you said, like the creating that space in HubSpot that mirrors how your business works, right? Like that's what custom objects are for, and the object library is kind of like a step in that direction for folks ideally whose data is shaped like those objects are shaped. But the um, like I've constructed these object templates of my own for things like um, locations, for physical locations, managing the identification, build out, that kind of thing. Contracts is another one where you have contract terms in data that is relevant to the other objects in HubSpot, right? Like these are, this is not, well, some of those actually are post purchase support. But if you know, put that stuff in notes where no one knows where to find it or look, and if you're lucky, they pin them to the top of records, but usually they're in the notes tab, which somebody searches and then they find the note and then they don't know how to get back there. Then you lose, like, yes, reporting, but you lose all other kind of visibility to automation, notifications, etc. Right? So, like, even in the sense of like, how would you your inroad to this of like the Amazon system notice one trip is better than two? It's because, if you will, if we translate that into the deliverable object context, it means it was a recognized it was about to generate a second deliverable, which was the one-time order, and that there was a pending delivery, recurring delivery, and it grouped those together as children under a parent delivery and then shipped that out, right? So like if you uh, you can't like whatever fulfillment means, deals aren't enough, invoices aren't enough, product line items aren't enough, right? Like systems are people that need to act on that data rather than just like pull a report and look at it, need more structure and depth, right? Um,
Yeah.
to
Oh,
operate.
now we're having fun because I wasn't even thinking about trying to ideate how Amazon did this with their data structure. And like I could definitely see a situation because it's either the second order, like the fresh order, um, but possibly the fresh shipment too. Like let's say a shipment object got
Right.
created and they both had the same associated, oh, I guess date or
I mean,
yes.
yeah, I mean, it definitely had the same delivery address, right? Like,
Yeah.
they use a different, I doubt they use address, they use a different type of record for that probably. Um, yeah, I think it happened at your account level, right?
Yeah.
And
And there was
the,
enough matching data
yeah,
to say like, okay, these five things match. We're combining. We're
right.
we're merging records.
In their case, it also knew that the scheduled delivery inventory was close enough or in the same place as your one-time order delivery, right? In the case of your industrial manufacturing example, right? Like if somebody you gave the example of a long, I don't know if a year is a long lead time in manufacturing, probably not, but let's say it's a long lead time that you have, 4 or 5 deliveries that need to happen during that year. And you have all of the dimensions of like what it's going to take for your like materials, inventory and delivery availability to, come in so that you can build the parts or whatever to ship them out. Seeing like, and again, I'm speculating from that side, but I've been involved in a lot of similar production systems where the last thing you want is somebody to say, uh, "Oh, this order got pulled because finance on their end, so they can't pay. What do we pull up?" You know, because you have to like retool, or you have equipment availability, or you can't do one of these orders because it has to flow into a second machine, and that one is tied up still, right? You need both
Yeah.
the view into the pipeline, which the deliverable object can give you if you have it configured correctly in HubSpot, but also related to the customer record, right?
Yeah.
And seeing the relationships and kind of like the snowballing decisions that result from one of those changes.
Yeah. No, you're nailing it because, and this is why people traditionally have not relied on CRMs for this. And this is why you've never seen an ERP implementation that was like the next one or the one before it.
Right.
Every business, and again, this is why there's so much complexity. There can be so much complexity because they really are built to be a blank slate, build it to literally match your business.
At great cost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what often happens, and this is what was happening, right? Because what you just described, it's a 2-year project. We're bought in, but it's got to be fulfilled with buy resell items that have expiration dates. Like if they don't get installed right away. And so when they get on site, we're building out a big building and you're just one piece to make the building work, right? If if that lead time changes, it's got to be shipped to a different spot. And we were tracking those address changes on line items, right? And there's only one space for an address
Right.
on line items or an order. So when you go to do the report on where stuff shipped, you can only see one address, even though it went to 4 different addresses, right? And what I found, and this is like why we talk about like if you bring in a system like HubSpot, it's very rarely correct or advisable to match your current process exactly, right? Because what was
Yeah.
actually happening, and this has been such an eye opener for me in recent years, and it tells me why like SaaS has such a hard time understanding more physical industry situations
Mm-hmm.
because the real communication for the people doing the work on the front line is happening verbally almost
Right.
every time.
Oh
Like
yeah.
we're in an office. And once I started watching this happening, the notes that hit the line items in the ERP are just because we've already done it and we just need to put the data somewhere, right? The communication actually happened when I hand you the order stack, like the big piece of paper, the like stapled together paper, and all these notes. Like it's no joke uh, that the notes on the in the ERP records almost can directly map to all of the post-it notes that exist throughout the stack of papers, right? So literally they're using a system because they're told they had to, but to get their job done,
Right.
they are communicating in a very different way, which when we do it that way, and now the customer asks to be brought in to status updates, it's impossible to do it in any other way than verbal communication on 1 hour calls to give project updates, and nobody wants to do that. So that's where it started to say like, okay, how can we, uh, of course, we started with collating data in a spreadsheet because a lot of the buy resale data isn't even in the system. It's in the purchaser's inbox. And
Yep.
how do we get that in? And that's where, like, the whole point, as I keep this up, like so many times, and this is why I started referring to HubSpot as a communication and relationship management tool, not a customer relationship management, because customer relationship management, 9 times out of 10, somebody hears that and they think sales data only,
Yeah. Well, I
right?
say most people treat CRMs like SPMs, which is sales process management. They don't do anything that helps them relate to the customer, and like this is a great example of that.
Yep. And so I love showing this example because usually when we're building out HubSpot, and even this is like most onboarding situations, this is where HubSpot suggests to start because it is the center. Like usually when you're getting stuff like this, you got to get a sales process figured out and built into the system, right? So I understand why we start here, but when you think about the overall life cycle, right? And we're talking about all of this revenue, which is teams are responsible for revenue goals
Yeah.
related to post sales activity everywhere. And if we only consider this small part of the process, like this is a deal. This is a
Right.
deal pipeline. And this is how little part of the process it
Yeah,
actually
for
is,
sure.
right?
And I mean, it's making me think of a couple of things in relating it to other industries that I've worked with clients in before. Is the there's two things like a the communication angle is like oftentimes um, the sales and marketing and even like account management and relationship folks don't work in the ERP because it's too low level technical, but it means that they are totally in the dark about these things, right? And the number of scenarios that I've been in on both sides of the table where something changes or something goes wrong, the client always knows that the salesperson will always pick up their phone, like unless they are on another call. And uh, they know that account managers are busy and sometimes take until the next day to get back to them. And so the whole handoff is often fraught with like, okay, here's your account manager, call them if you have like status questions or whatever. And when it's like, hey, we've had a major issue that's not your fault, but impacts your delivery. And I need to talk to somebody now because the ball is rolling and like there's a, if we
And I'm
solve
in
this in
charge of
right, if we solve
managing
this in
this
48
shipping
hours,
dock.
it's a 6 month problem. If we solve it in 72 hours, it's an 18-month problem. So I need to talk to somebody now. And the
Yeah.
salesperson's like, man, I can't even see, I don't know. So
Let me call
like,
somebody.
yeah. And they call somebody and call somebody, right? So like get the, you don't want to manage like your tool and die machines or whatever in HubSpot, but I talk a lot about like the systems that run the complex data need to vend the status data back to HubSpot so that the salesperson can see that, or the account manager can see that, or real estate can see that, or whoever, right? Like you don't need HubSpot to own everything, but it should have some knowledge of everything. And the other one
Yes.
is like the deal process being such a small part of delivering value to the customer, like both the like tangible practical value of in the manufacturing case we delivered the machine or the part or whatever in other sales and marketing things, it's like did I achieve both my pragmatic but also the emotional outcome that I was looking for is we focus on the sales pipeline there, but the oftentimes businesses struggle to keep revenue tied to the KPIs that the subsequent teams end up managing toward because it's what's on their plans, right? And so, like, if your KPI for your fulfillment team is like, um, what percent of the time did you hit your delivery date plus or minus 1 day? Um, that's not a revenue goal exactly, but it does describe if you have built and are running effective systems. But so like, okay, it's a good management goal, but that doesn't, that disconnection from revenue, if you don't find another way to kind of describe that relationship, then you know, that total kind of value visibility starts to erode, right? And everybody doing their job effectively ends up not supporting revenue well.
Oh man, I almost named my inbound submission engineering value visibility. Because that's what we're doing here at the end of the day. Uh, like, especially from a revenue perspective, like if you don't have, and this is why, like there is an uphill battle on the value of HubSpot as a traditional CRM marketing and sales tool, its ability to help with this. And the way I like to break it down, and you're starting to get into it, is like, we're not saying HubSpot's going to be the ERP or the inventory management system or even the product lifecycle management system. It just needs to know what's going on,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so I usually break it down into like there's three things we need to do with data. And it's create it, manage and maintain it, or communicate it, right? HubSpot is far and away the best system to communicate things. So at least if you put the data there, now it can communicate it effectively for you,
Yeah.
right? But we're using other systems in a lot of cases to manage and maintain and also create the manufacturing data, the shipping data, the people are not the customer facing teams probably shouldn't be in HubSpot in a lot of cases. It's not the best tool for that. And that's where we could build some stuff, but HubSpot is not, as an organization or an ecosystem, building the QR code trackers that are used out in the warehouse, or like these other systems have gotten good at serving those activities. Let them do that. But anybody interfacing with the customer
Right.
needs to be working out of HubSpot. And if you're wondering, uh, well, where do I put it in HubSpot? I want to. I'm playing with getting the
Here
idea
we
of
go.
like, uh, you know, the line from, this is The Graduate. I forget which movie. Like one word,
Yeah.
plastics,
Plastics. Yeah.
right? In HubSpot terms, like I'm constantly helping people realize the power of pipelines. So one word, pipelines.
Pipelines.
Like literally, and you don't have to know anything about these back end systems. And it's hard to get straight answers from those the ERP providers and the ERP implementers, because they don't necessarily see it like this. They see it in like managing margins, managing inventory, managing costs, right? It's not status. Status updates are like a consequence of doing all this stuff. We need to know status so that we can get a job done, not so that we can inform customers,
Right. And
right?
yeah, I mean, um, the, I don't, thankfully, touch a lot of ERPs hands on, but I've worked in a lot of systems for clients and personally where there was an ERP involved. And ERPs can do pipelines and status. Obviously, they are like super powerful, sophisticated. It's like an ERP is functionally like a giant box of Legos, and like you can build whatever you want out of that. But the challenge is that flexibility in the years of that it takes to build them typically, and all of the things that have been built before you come in and need some visibility into a process makes it hard to do that. And the processes change more often than like whether you have inventory or not, right? And so building out an effective like inventory management system within an ERP is, you know, there's a lot of existing knowledge and patterns to employ there. But every ERP that I've had the displeasure of having to interface with, um, when you start to say like, well, what's the process? No one has built one on top. It's always like, well, first I go to here and I click this and I do that and I get this and then like I've seen people like copying, not having a solution other than copying and pasting with a keyboard data between two views in the same ERP. And it's like, well, should we talk to somebody about this? And they're like, yeah, we got a quote and it's $85,000. I'm like, okay, well, I understand why you're struggling to get buy-in for that, but also like, are you kidding me? Um, and it's like process automation is a discipline separate from ERP, development and maintenance, that has arisen because of things like this, because of those challenges, right? And so like pulling it out, as you said, like making the system that humans have to use aware of that and not have to be super deep on the ERP side or whatever, uh, is like not only easier, cheaper, but pragmatically far more likely to happen, right? Than like an 18-month project to update a process in the ERP, by which time, uh, you know, you no longer have that client, and so the process needs to change or whatever.
Yeah. And like the fact is, in most cases, and this can be whether it's a complex spreadsheet or an inventory management or accounting or, ERP, the processes have been built at some level of complexity that you're probably not used to running into if you're coming at it from the HubSpot world. And the something that jumped out to me right away is we had to choose. Again, we come back to HubSpot, the marketing and sales CRM system. Finance teams, operational teams, that data is often not real, like for them, right? The real data is in the financial system of record. It's in the
Right.
operational system of record,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So that paints a color over HubSpot that if we want their buy-in to use HubSpot to help with this, we have to cross that bridge. And it makes sense because when you think about marketing and sales, like a salesperson can do the whole sales process without touching a CRM or even writing notes down. Like it's just call, have a conversation. You're buying. Okay, I've got your verbal. My order team will contact you and get your order started. Like that happens, right?
Yeah.
But everything after that cannot exist, cannot happen without the process. It's very ones and zeros, like black and white, if this, then
Mm-hmm.
that, right? So that's why that team also doesn't want your opportunity forecasting and the stuff that's not like closed won and like PO
Right.
received, like real data in their system of record, right? So we're trying to help you create this complete system where the system of record is the entire system. Like
Yeah.
customer teams happen to be using HubSpot, back office teams might be using other systems because that's what's supporting them. But the entire thing is the source of truth. It doesn't have to be one system or the other. Rarely should that be the case,
Yeah.
right? So, as I have here, so what I noticed early on as I was trying to understand how to have this conversation of, well, these ERPs, they have a CRM. Like, why can't I use those? Right? I'm like, okay, this is going to be fun. But it didn't take too long to say, like, again, communication platform. That's what HubSpot is. Like, no ERP can claim that it's going to do that in any great kind of way. And again, just because it has customer data in it doesn't mean it's a customer relationship management system,
Yeah. And
right?
sending transactional emails, triggered emails, is not communication management.
Exactly. And even though finance teams will tell you that they are communicating with that monthly notification to try and get paid, they're also the quickest to get on board with understanding that that is not actually communication. And if we communicate better up front, collections list goes down,
Yeah.
we get paid faster, things like that, right? And if you look into all these systems, where we're managing shipping schedules and production schedules, almost all of them have some kind of pipeline staging gate built out, right? And the magic of custom objects and now the object library is you can do that in HubSpot. And that's all you need to do to get away from the place of HubSpot is marketing and sales only. Let's just get the contact company deal data over into the real system of record, and you can just do whatever you want in HubSpot. Or what I've also seen, which was worrisome when I understood how people approached it, but again, it's because the ERPs have such a they are the real system of record in a lot of organizations. It's really hard to unseed them. So we end up mirroring the ERP data model inside of HubSpot,
Right. Yeah.
which totally ruins HubSpot's data model. And no longer can it be the best communication tool in the world.
Right. And there
And
are things that are, like I think HubSpot's the custom object data model and the extensibility of the existing or of the first class objects is great and is like 95% of most businesses. There are the some of the weird complex relationships that start to break down and become hard to manage, that you run into periodically. It's like, oh, we need to do a lookup table of this versus that, and pulls this value out, and I think of a lot of those like modeling questions as like, the whole like, 90% of the iceberg is underwater. And I always think like in some of those relationships, HubSpot is the 10%. In some of those relationships, HubSpot is the 90%, right? So like, in the franchise space, which I'll keep coming back to, is like the can you use HubSpot as your customer platform for acquiring new franchisees and helping them launch their businesses? Yes. Can you use HubSpot as the CRM for an individual location doing sales and marketing? Sure, but it isn't always going to be the best in that second scenario. And HubSpot would probably like me to say it's always the best and you should sell it to everybody. But a lot of franchise businesses have extremely specialized, very not inflexible, but like regimented processes there that are not directly managed by a salesperson, things like that, where a built-to-suit or an industry-specific CRM for the franchisee makes a lot more sense. And so, like in that scenario, HubSpot is the 10%, and it needs talkback from the market performance data, all of that stuff from individual occasions. It doesn't need to model all of that; it needs to understand it, right? But for the franchisor side of acquiring new franchisees, it's the 90%, and there's 10% of information coming from other places that needs to be represented in HubSpot, right? And like an ERP, is that where for the complex ERP stuff, HubSpot's the 10% and the ERP is the 90%, right?
yeah, and here is, man, that's a brilliant setup. Uh, Here's an example of that and why, like, as much as it would be nice to just press play and install, right? Like, this is the NetSuite, certified app, sync data,
Yeah.
right? Okay, this should work. Um, I don't hear a lot of great stories that if they're using this one that they're happy with it. Most times, if you're working with a partner, they will look to build something custom. Um,
Yep.
and in that situation you just described is very apparent if you just look at the objects, right? Because this is where it's one of the few ERP integrations that has actually moved on from contacts, companies, and deals only.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what we're talking about, so very clearly, like products is the 10%, right? And it's the way that it's built. But if you look at, we've got assembly items, we've got inventory items, we've got kit
Yeah,
items,
non-inventory
resale,
items and the same as inventory items.
service sale items. Like in all of these things in the ERP, they are managed through stage and gate pipelines, guaranteed,
Yeah.
right? Because we got to get them, we got to build them, we got to make sure they're right, we got to quality check, we got to ship them, right? All these stages are managed in the system. That's the whole point of using that system. Products don't have pipeline stages, like not yet, at least,
Right.
right? And that's the whole point of, in the scenarios I've described, like products is the pre-planned event, the thing that you would love to sell in HubSpot. Line items is the super customizable, malleable, like let's get the sale done, right? Do you want one, five, or 10?
Right.
Uh, knowing you're only going to pick one, we don't want to create 3 records knowing that we're going to delete 2 of them. But then closed one happens. Don't touch that object. Don't touch that line item again because we've committed
Right.
to delivering
It's a
as is.
typically it constitutes a contract, right?
Right. And so then the missing piece has been this post-sale object. Say, okay, we still got to manage the thing. Like we got to manage it in relationship with other things, and just creating the space for things that have been challenging. Because this, if you understand how these systems work, this is not helpful, right? This kind of integration. And this is why immediately people go outside and say, okay, I need something custom, right? This
Right.
doesn't even make sense for how we would manage this, right?
Right. And critically, like in the name of like the customer, managing the customer's expectations, delivering post sale visibility and value, right? Like the only way to, like a customer who's, I don't know if this applies like in this context, what you're showing on the screen, but in so many purchases in customer relationships, delivery relationships, there are non required but non value added, never seen in a line item, never on an invoice, things that you have to deliver or do or acquire, right? That you can't service the customer effectively if you don't do it, but they don't care. It doesn't impact, other than if you don't do it, you messed up the relationship, right? And
Yes.
so like if how you manage those things and how you surface overall the status of your deliverables to the customer without being like, well, here's the, you know, like functionally, here's in a service business, right? Those are the steps that you have to do to set up your account management, get them into the billing system, assign owners to the records, all of this stuff that has no value whatsoever to the customer, direct value. But when you start talking about physical goods, like the, their order shouldn't tell them that you are out of stock of the size of box that you need to ship the screws, right? And you can't deliver that. It's like, oh well, our boxes are also, the 4 boxes that we need to ship or show up in the line items on your thing, because that's how we have to manage it. Sorry, and you would build a, you know, oftentimes I've seen some things in ERPs in the past where those weren't actually connected to orders, and then you do have delays because you're waiting for packaging. But the those systems are again custom in an ERP and therefore invisible to the customer. But when you are talking about like, well, how do we do this post sale delivery in HubSpot and surface those things, like that example that you showed, products totally insufficient, for something like
Yeah.
that. But
And
you can do that with the custom object, custom deliverables object that you're describing.
yeah. And even like I've gotten creative and doing this with services and listings, and like the key is a place for something that's wanted and leveraged by people, not in a begrudging like way, because we got to put it somewhere. Because that's what happens when you described all these other things that need to happen, right? It's never made sense to have them in a CRM because it doesn't have a dollar amount attached to it.
And it
So,
doesn't go on the customer record. So like, where do I put it? Right.
right. And like, so what will happen, and this happens with shipping as a cost line item all the time, like we've got to put it somewhere. It's got to be in the quote. but then we got to report on dollars that we owe commissions on. We got to back out all these shipping line items, or we're saying shipping zero and we're putting the dollar amount somewhere else. And
Right.
that's what happens when you try to do it inside the CRM. If it's not there, it's in the delivery systems, because the team needs to know that it's got to deliver the warranty. It's got to create the warranty. It's got to create the contract. It's got to create the certification that this thing has been tested, right? And it gets the stamp, and we're going to send that with it. So now we need $0 items in our ERP, which finance teams hate.
Yeah.
Like that's the whole reason they don't want to bring the CRM data in. That's not real for them, but we've got to deliver it because it's very real for our customer.
Right.
And the way that we have to do it, and I've heard this with warranties, and it's just surprising, but you have to believe us. This is the difference between the $1 million implementations that some companies have of this stuff, and that there's been nothing in between that and the Google spreadsheet. Like, this is where HubSpot, it's more affordable than ever. And it honestly just has not been done well,
Right.
right? Because instead, all these niche systems like warranty management systems, contract management systems, like have been put in place. And that's when the huge dollar amount implementations happen. And when they don't, like that information exists in the ERP, it's impossible to find it. So when the customer calls up asking about their warranty, you're asking them for the
Yeah.
warranty information you should know,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Just in the last 60 days, I've been asked twice for the purchase record from a company that I bought directly from via a support ticket associated with the email address that is associated with the account that made the order. Right. It's a great
Yeah,
example that you gave.
not the best experience. One from a customer experience perspective, but maybe their warranty's out. Like, and now they have all the leverage in the world and they deserve it if you didn't take care of their data. Uh, So, but we could, I'm super passionate about this topic, obviously. I appreciate you giving me the floor today. This is the audience throughout the whole
Yeah.
journey, like, is why when you really take the time to build this foundation of data and continue to build and build and build, it just becomes invaluable and you're always ahead of any competition, any new opportunity, anything that shows up. You're ready to handle it, and you're ready to handle it, very well in a profitable way. So we'll wrap there today. Again, join us in a couple weeks where Josh has got a great track lined up with a couple of great marketers, Danielle Urban and Madeline Donovan,
Mm-hmm.
part of a big slate of some great HubSpot expertise coming at you at the Profoundly Kickoff event. Head over to profound.ly to register at the big old CTA on the front page. And until next time, Mr. Oaks, have a great day, everybody.
Yeah. You too. Bye bye. For a second there, I
Yes.
was like, oh, shoot, do I need to stop the stream?